It's a pleasure to have all of you this evening to the webinar being organized by Woxsen University, India, in association with AACSB International and EFMD Global. Today, it is our pleasure to have, the panel from EFMD and AACSB themselves, and the moderator being Nishit Jain from EFMD Asia. So let me quickly introduce the panel discussion, the objective why we are having this meeting in the first place. You see, collaboration between India and academia is key to catalyze innovation and growth in technology. While industry often focuses on addressing solutions that are of near-term commercial value, and academia focuses on building new knowledge through research and imparting education to students, the combination of industry coupled with academia can yield accelerated development of new breakthroughs. Therefore, industry-academia partnerships are always instrumental in advancing research and creating a skilled workforce. At Woxsen University, this is a special webinar as its core pillars involve fostering the culture of research and development, internationalization, entrepreneurship, sustainability, innovation, and experiential learning. With this, I would like to officially introduce you to the moderator of today's panel discussion. We have Mr. Nishit Jain, who is the Senior Special Advisor of EFMD Asia, joining us this evening in India. Then we have the panel members from different parts of the world, from AACSB and EFMD, and Hired, which is an extended arm of EFMD, joining us for this panel discussion. I would like to introduce you to the first speaker, Mr. Raj Devasagayam, the Dean of Leon Hess Business School, Monmouth University, New Jersey, United States. Second speaker is Dr. Mark Rosenbaum he's the Dean of St. Xavier University, the Graham School of Management, US. In fact, he is the incoming Dean of Hawaii Pacific University in the US. That's for all the audience. And then the third speaker is Ms. Amy Lemon, who is the regional head for AACSB International South Asia. And the fourth speaker is Dr. Amber Wigmore Alvarez, who is the Chief Talent Officer of Hired, which is a talent management arm of EFMD Global. I welcome you all to this panel discussion, and we really look forward to having a great evening with your presence. Over to Nishit Jain to take this conversation forward, and we can start with the opening remarks thereon.
Thank you. Thank you, Chahat, for putting this perspective in place and a very timely and I think a much needed discussion on how we could engage better with the corporate world. And I'm so glad that I have my fellow colleague Amber, who's a corporate expert when we talk about EFMD side of the things. I think she will bring really great perspective, and we have some very senior colleagues like Raj and Mark from leading business schools out there, and no introduction needed for Amy, who's a dear friend, colleague, and we work in complementarity, I think, at EFMD and AAC has been several forums and several activities. So really happy to have you all around. And I hope we are able to have a very meaningful discussion. So just to add before I get started is we will try to keep it as informal as possible, because the idea is to make the maximum of this forum. So if there is some really, interesting question, maybe you can put it in the chat box or raise your hand and we can try and address it alongside. And probably Chahat and his colleagues and team will help us point out to those questions. So I would give the advantage twofold to start with the lady and my fellow colleague Amber to put you in the spot.
Sure.
So Amber, I was just wondering, at Higher Ed, we do so much work with the corporate side of EFMD and global corporations.
Right.
How do you think that, how is that Higher Ed is trying to bridge this particular, the gap between the industry and the academic world, which has been a long-standing divide? And especially, given the context of the pandemic, wherein we can't really shake hands, meet people, be face-to-face. So what is that you're doing? If you can, give us some perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, first of all, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about talent and careers. I always say career services are one of the most strategic and relevant departments of our academic institutions. When students decide to pursue a certain degree or specialization or course, it's often with the goal of career progression. So ultimately, I've spent my entire career dedicated to other people's careers and aspirations and helping to accelerate the matching between top talent in the EFMD network, studying at the more than 700 business schools in 92 countries, and the opportunities in the global workforce, wherever they might lie, and helping companies to identify top talent going beyond the obvious and tried and tested choices in their usual list of schools and looking all over, because we have top talent studying everywhere with such internationalization. So great question. How are we bridging it? We're doing it in many different ways. So as Nishit has already mentioned, Hired is the official career services initiative of the EFMD schools, including Woxsen. And we have a shared career services platform where we have a global job board with thousands of opportunities. We work with more than 4,500 hiring companies, and any given week, like this week, we have more than 2,000 job opportunities all over the world. So what happened when we started in lockdown and actually having quite a presence in China and many opportunities in China and EFMD schools in China, we started a bit earlier. And we actually did a pilot right at the start of lockdown with our first virtual career fair in China. And it was very successful for our schools in China. So during the first year in 2020, we actually, when the whole world locked down and companies and employers and recruiters were no longer able to go on campuses, we pivoted at Hired very quickly. And in a matter of weeks, we organized a series of 26 virtual career fairs where we had thousands of recruiters meeting with talent from hundreds of our schools and bringing those opportunities to them. It was a tremendous success. In 2021, we decided to continue with the initiative, just seeing how much employers are enjoying the digital recruitment and how it's really accelerating their processes, and they're better able to target, and the feedback we're getting is they're able to connect with thousands of students and alumni all over the globe in a matter of hours without going campus by campus and school by school. So what happened in 2021 was that schools at the same time also started organizing their own private virtual career fairs. They're using the Hired technology and the technology that we've created in-house for that. So that's fantastic. So what we did was we consolidated the 2021 career fairs into 2 weeks, April and October editions, and we welcomed more than 200 employers that brought 1,200 recruiters. They met with our talent that came from 172 different schools. And just to give you an idea of how well the talent is engaging, there were more than 60,000 booth visits to those virtual stands. Fantastic application rate of 31%. Of the talent that looks at those opportunities actually clicks to apply. And at the same time, so this is what we plan on doing in 2022. We'll continue with the virtual fair initiative as we start lockdowns again in different parts of the world. And just the fact that talent have really, really enjoyed the digital recruiting and how efficient it's been and how they can be one-on-one with a recruiter in another corner of the globe that maybe wasn't possible before. That's one area we're bridging the gap. And another area would be our recent global partnership with Coursera. So offering to the EFMD talent individually, or because their schools come on board, purchasing bulk licenses for certain programs, for them to access the more than 8,000 courses and guided projects on Coursera across so many different domains. And this is what's giving them an edge in competitive selection processes. Yes, they're coming away and graduating with top degrees from EFMD schools, but do they have the in-demand digital skills that employers are looking for? The Power BI, the Google Analytics, Trello, Slack, Canva, SurveyMonkey. So this is what we're doing, is we're helping to do a massive upskilling of EFMD talent to ensure that they fare well in competitive selection processes. In addition to our masterclass series assessments, basically what we're doing is giving talent an edge, and which the employability and placement, and you do use the P word in India. It's a country I'm so fond of and had a chance to spend a lot of time in for recruiting purposes and with schools. And placement is very important. And so many of our schools are rankings and accreditation oriented, and careers criteria and placement make up such an important percentage of those rankings. So ensuring that our talent is positioned favorably, and we do it by giving them a boost to their employability. So those would be some examples, Nishit, of how we're closing that gap.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, that brings me really to Professor Mark. I mean, sorry for waking you up this morning. I mean, my apologies, but I mean, I was just curious because, I mean, with so much, I mean, online, virtual, like Amber just mentioned, I mean, does it really change the strategy for, I mean, your way of reaching out to the corporate world, or helping your, I mean, engagement more robust or less? I mean, what do you think has happened as a consequence of pandemic?
I actually believe that the pandemic has brought community members to universities to look for solutions. So during the pandemic, we had many local small businesses reach out to university faculty for assistance, especially with starting websites. Many companies that never had websites, especially small mom and pop companies, suddenly went online. And when we look at the importance of experiential learning projects, ELC, I call them ELC projects, experiential learning consulting projects. I want to talk about this from two perspectives, because I know that we have many PhD students, we have new faculty members. I've had the honor and privilege to work on several ELC projects throughout my entire career. These are life-changing projects. So when a small company, like a domestic violence agency, reached out to me and said, Mark, can you help us with social support services for female domestic violence? I knew nothing about female domestic violence. And I took the project on, and that ended up being a paper. If you look at all of my research in cancer research, I didn't one day go from business to cancer research. This was an ELC project. This was a company, this was a nonprofit organization, Living Well Cancer Center, saying, Mark, we offer all of these classes to people with cancer, but are we making a difference in people's lives? Well, that brought me onto a cancer stream of research. And I think that as faculty members, so I'm going to wear my faculty hat, many new faculty only want to be involved in projects that result in A-level journals. And I know that's important. But when a small company reaches out to you, when a nonprofit company reaches out to you, the end goal in terms of a research article isn't always clear. However, now if I wear my dean's hat, I have turned every ELC project into an intellectual contribution, whether that's been an A-level article, whether that's been a managerial article, whether it's been a presentation, or whether it's been something that impacts me. And Amy will be talking a lot about societal impact for AACSB 2020. AACSB 2020 standards basically, if I could summarize it up in one word or one sentence, AACSB wants business schools to be a force for good in our communities. How can you be a force for good if we don't engage with local businesses? And I don't mean just the Fortune 100 or the Fortune 500. I mean helping that mom and pop firm. One of my ELC projects, I helped a local barbershop launch an online site. What a great learning experience that was for me. And I encourage my faculty to publish in managerial-oriented publications. So I'm going to plug Business Horizons here. Business Horizons is an excellent outlet for me when I'm working on a real project, a real-world project that has applied managerial implications. Publications like Harvard Business Review, Business Horizons, MIT Sloan. Excellent publications. So as a dean, we want to make sure that when we look at this list of publications that we want our faculty to publish in, we want to make sure that they're just not all limited to just 3 or 5, but that we look at managerial outlets with the same credibility. And we could talk about table 3 or table 8. I mean, there's spaces for applied research. There's places for basic discovery. And I encourage faculty members that if I'm looking at societal impact of our research, it's critical. And I know that when we work with a small business or a mid-sized business or with a community member, we will have societal impact. So hopefully I answered your question.
No,
from two different perspectives.
That's interesting. But I mean, I was just wondering that did it really push you to think differently from a corporate standpoint? I mean, because now you have a much larger pool of corporates to engage with, right? I mean, as opposed to, I mean, maybe the 100 or 150 earlier, for instance.
Right. I would say that every ELC project takes me out of my comfort zone.
Okay. Well,
and as a faculty member, you will be pushed. We tend to believe that because we finish our PhDs, let's say in marketing or management, we become experts in a very small area. And yet when you work with a business and you understand their issues, you start to broaden as a faculty member and as a researcher and as a human being. So that, again, I've had projects that ranged from working with McDonald's on branding to Calamos Investments to working with a domestic violence agency in Rockford, Illinois, to trying to work with a teenage pregnancy solution in DeKalb, Illinois. Now,
interesting. I mean, that's a range of projects. I mean, very, very vibrant canvas. I mean, to engage with actually. But you know, I mean, that sort of pushes me also to sort of the accreditation side of the business. I mean, at EFMD, for instance, we have a very dedicated one of the strong pillars on corporate engagement, corporate interface, so on and so forth. So, Amy, I mean, any views and as to how do you encourage more and more on the AACSB side to push your schools to, you know, work well or work deeply with the corporate world? I mean, any views on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much a pillar of AACSB as well. The 2013 standards brought in these concepts of engagement, innovation, and impact. And then, as Mark was saying, the evolution of that is this concept of societal impact. But we also worked on, you know, the impact of research for quite some time, and we're involved in RRBM just as EFMD is, and which is a lot of what we're talking about here is that business schools do engage with and have always engaged with the recruiters, right? With those who are hiring their students. That's always been important. But in order to have that kind of impact that we're talking about, that engagement has to be much more deeply embedded. And that's written into the standards from, the strategic emphasis of the school, and how they align themselves using their strengths and their resources to have that kind of impact. So depending on what type of school you are, to ensuring, of course, we require that there are career services, that the curriculum it is reviewed by the school's external stakeholders, which include, we say that as a broad term because it includes business, it includes alumni that are working in business, it includes NGOs, it includes government, and that the curriculum is kept relevant through that engagement. And then, especially when we come to research, one of the things, the research assessment exercises that are happening around the world highlight this, but that engaging with business through all the different ways in which business schools do engage with business helps to frame those questions. Because business schools have a responsibility to work with business, to work with governments, to work on those really wicked problems, because they have a lot of value to offer. And when we expect, just publishing in a journal isn't enough anymore, and it's a tough thing to track, and it's a tough thing for schools to really endeavor. But we see it. Top school in China that I was just reviewing a report for. This is a school that, highly ranked school, and their whole strategy is shifting to this idea of connections with industry from every facet that they do, and that changes the whole motivation and incentive structure within a school. But it's something that with the framework that AACSB provides, schools can continuously say, okay, check in here, we need to be engaged, we need to be working with our stakeholders. And that's
a very interesting point, Amy, that you just mentioned. The school changing the entire strategic shift or a seismic shift, if I may say, because that really brings me to Dean Raj. I was more curious because in the perspective, we've all always engaged with the corporate world for internships, for jobs, for employability, for research, so on and so forth. But has there been a significant thought and time spent in looking at what are the new goals, the new milestones, the new objectives, and how do we reach out to them? Reflecting from what Amy just mentioned briefly. Any views, Professor Raj, there?
Thank you, Nishit. And one of the advantages of going towards the end of a panel like this is I benefit from listening to others. As I'm making notes, I realize what we have just heard are innovations that came out of the pandemic. Mark mentioned what his school is involved in, and I'm making furious notes about experiential learning and consulting projects. Amy, of course, has mentioned what AACSB has been speaking about throughout the last year and more than that. And so none of that comes as a surprise, but gives us a way to innovate, Amy. And so that's very helpful. I liked Amber's actual practical examples of how her industry has changed. Similar things have happened to my students, my faculty, and our way of thinking. Let me get more specific. Monmouth University is a small university, about 5,000 students. 1,000 of those are in the business school, so about 20%. About 200 graduate students added to that. The Leon Hess Business School has been accredited for several decades now. We have strong faculty committed to our accreditation, committed to our mission. Having said that, now I'll get more specific about the key goals and what impact all of this is having on us. I want our audience to sort of think of a triangle. And I'm not sure if I'm getting that through visually, but in this triangle, the key players for us at Monmouth are our faculty colleagues. Enabling them makes student success possible, which is why we exist. So at the top of this triangle, symbolically, we have the student body. The faculty success is not ignored in this. And then on the right-hand side or left, however you're seeing it, is the industry. And very soon, in a few minutes, I'll turn this into a diamond, and you'll see what I mean by that. So the notion is that we have been doing all of this for several decades. A pandemic accreditation body, inspiring colleagues such as Mark and others, give us ideas that push us further. If you are looking at that triangle, our faculty are able to take their knowledge to the classroom and provide the research in breakable, chewable form for our students. Our faculty is able to connect with the industry to make sure that what they take into the classroom actually has an impact on the learning derived by our students in light of the future of work in their industry. And then, of course, the industry gets to enjoy research and also get labor that's completely well trained and trained in line with what's waiting for them when they graduate. In the next round, when we get a chance, I'll complete that triangle. But for a second, I'm reading a book right now called Uncontrolled Spread. It deals with COVID. It has very little to do with business because it's written by an MD. Scott Gottlieb was the former FDA commissioner of United States and worked in the Trump administration, was there at the front of this COVID crisis. He points out, and it's a very dense book, but somewhere in there, I'm getting the business lessons. And I'll stop after this example. So just so that I get the names right, I want to make sure I refer to my notes. But a couple of doctors in Germany, and you might know this or you might remember it as I speak. Dr. Ugur Sahin, and somebody who is Turkish might be able to help me pronounce it better. Dr. Ugur Sahin and Dr. Özlem Tureshi started the research in a lab while they were graduate students in Germany, both of them immigrants from Turkey. The research grew. They took their original research and started a company of their own called Biotech. And one fine day, a pandemic happened. Everything that they were doing until that point was basic research that seemed like it was in a vacuum. Only 4 people in the world knew what they were doing. And all of a sudden, with the pandemic, they realized something interesting. They had the technology to deliver the vaccine where it's supposed to be delivered. I'll cut the story short. It's a fascinating tale, but look at the human victory in that. So they right away let everyone know that they have a possibility. The CEO of Pfizer talks with them. Not a single contract is signed. Let that sink in. Turkish doctors trained in Germany, working in Germany, Pfizer in the United States, and my state, New Jersey, nothing, no contract has been signed. It's a handshake deal. No money has been discussed because there's a pandemic. Humanity is at stake. So they put in the technology known as mobile RNA, mRNA. If you're going to look at it, it's also called messenger RNA. I'll stop this story right here, but look at this connection. Students, doctoral students, faculty, pharmaceuticals, and my students get to benefit from this story, to see that linkage and realize internships are not just internships anymore. And I'll borrow and steal the words of Mark. They are experiential consulting opportunities. And so there is something to be gained by that connection. I believe that everything that has been said so far in terms of societal impact, that story sort of illustrates it. And there are many more stories that my fellow panelists are going to share. I truly look at what we are doing today. There are right now 132 people on this meeting. We are on different continents. There are a few here who will understand the next few words I'm going to speak. I cannot resist the temptation. So Leon has business school, Monmouth University के न्यू जर्सी कैंपस से मैं आप सब लोगों का अभिवादन करता हूं. If you understand my words, fold your hands. That way I can see. Now notice different languages, different cultures, different ways of looking, and we are connecting. A pandemic has brought us together. What seemed like a crisis has turned into an opportunity. And it's prescient that AACSB thought of societal impact a couple of years before the pandemic. The 2020 standards were actually already being voted on in 2019 and so on. So we're a forward-thinking organization. It's interesting how Amber's organization reacts and provides 60,000 employers an opportunity to get the best talent. So it's amazing how Mark and his university and his faculty are able to see that academic research, while important, managerial implications become important too.
Very interesting observations, Professor Raj. I mean, I must compliment the fact that, despite the pandemic, despite the challenges, I think the relationships play a very significant role in how we are, moving them around and how we're trying to bring them all together. I mean, as a society, for the better and the greater human good, I think remarkable. I mean, I think that's a great observation. Amber, I think you have a question there, but I would also like to pose you another question, and then probably you can answer them together, because I think what was happening, when you looked at the talent side of the world and relationships, which is one of the key concerns, how is the digital technology or the transformation happening, trying to, bring these things together? Because relationships in the conventional way, we used to handshake, meet, greet, and talk and sit and have a wine or a dinner or a meal together, and it used to last. In the online, it's like a click button, you just get connected, and another click, you're just out. So out of sight, out of mind, and I don't even remember if people will remember us. So how do you, manage that?
And how do we move into a hybrid world, hopefully going forward, and achieve that balance? I had raised my hand to say, what a beautiful story, Dean Raj, and just a great example, and it perhaps wasn't even necessarily your intention, but we're bringing into play that diversity, equity, and inclusion piece. You referred to the Turkish couple immigrants in Germany with that incredible technology, and just how EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion, DEI, however you want to call it, is so important these days in organizations. And today, talent has choices, and if they're not seeing the diversity and inclusion reflected in a workplace, be it as a path for themselves or as a reflection of that business's values, well, they go elsewhere, right? So I think it's so important, and that's a trend that we're increasingly seeing now in 2022, and we're increasingly meeting with the people responsible for diversity and inclusion in selection processes. So I just wanted to highlight that aspect of the story and the importance of getting a diverse perspective into our organizations. And so many of our schools, we've done it for a long time. I believe that schools are a bit ahead of the curve, even ahead of the major employers out there that are just starting to do this and starting to partner with organizations to ensure inclusiveness in their workplace. But still so much work to be done. In terms of, you raised a great question now in the digital world, and I refer to what we call Dr. Albert Morabian's model of 55-38-7% when it comes to body language and nonverbal communication, which is actually part of my area of expertise in what I do a lot of teaching in. And it's the fact that it's only 7% of our communication is the spoken word, 38% is the tone, and 55% will be the nonverbal communication. Interestingly, that 55% coincides with the fact that 55.9% of hiring decisions actually take place in the first 5 to 15 minutes, right? So how are we adapting? And especially when you have those 5 to 15 minutes to create that lasting first impression, because as cliche as it is, first impressions never get a second chance. So we do a lot of work, even just with on-screen presence and how our talent can have a greater impact. And ahead of each of our global career fairs, we actually do training with the EFMD talent. So how can they have impact in a short amount of time through their elevator pitch, through their online screen presence, the questions that they're asking, how they're engaging, the research they're doing to wow the recruiters. At the same time, we are seeing the implementation of more game-based assessment processes taking place. The fact that before that used to be a stage, game-based assessments and the use of video games to quickly assess the cognitive and emotional traits and thousands of data points of talent. It used to be a stage of the selection process. We've even had recruiters of ours in their virtual stands as the first step is, if you're interested in working for us, take this assessment, and only then will they contact you if you're the right match for their ideal prototype. So the world of recruiting, the world of HR is no longer that dull, boring area of an organization that it was over the years once seen as. HR has evolved tremendously and it's very tech driven. The world of HR tech is just so fascinating how things are working. And as a matter of fact, we are in the process of partnering with an organization to use AI to both position our talents CVs in a more readable format, because it's only about 30% of data on a CV is read by applicant tracking systems. We are now partnering to HR XML the CVs of our talent to ensure they have that visibility. But this CV optimization and what we're doing with our systems will also allow recruiters to be more inclusive in their recruiting practices and allow them to blind recruit. So they should be, ideally, blinding out even sometimes the school, because the school can be seen as an indication of socioeconomic status sometimes, or to blind out age or ethnicity or nationality. So this is what we're working on to ensure that we are making the most of these digital recruiting practices to accelerate that matching, to allow our recruiters to do better targeting and to allow them to go beyond the tried and tested processes in schools they've always gone to, and to source talent no matter where they are, any corner of the globe. And so that's the future.
Those are really interesting, because guys, I mean, out there, I hear and I know that there are a lot of students, so hear these loud and clear. You have an opportunity. I mean, the Woxsen graduates of probably, I don't know, I mean, 2020 may not have those opportunities, but 21, 22, I mean, you would have that entire world to reach out to, because, I mean, like I just mentioned, I mean, if you have the talent, I mean, there is an opportunity. I mean, that's as simple as it could be, I mean, which is interesting because of the blindedness. But that also points me to the fact, because, you know, I mean, Amy, I mean, you've been looking at ethics and value, and it drives me directly from Amber, because when you talk about inclusiveness, when you talk about the fact that we are, you know, blinding the corporate names, the people, the pedigree, and so on and so forth. So how does accreditation play into it? I mean, how is that you could help institutions which are probably smaller or in remote locations to come up to speed and, I mean, work on the areas which are pretty important for ethics and the value, even in a remote setting?
So, well, we have ethics within AACSB is at the ethical behavior. So we expect schools to have policies and processes to inculcate, you know, to handle ethics on campus and to behave ethically. But we have also within the guiding principles the diversity and inclusion, and diversity and inclusion is also in the standards as well. And where we come to that because we're dealing with schools in over 100 countries in different contexts and different things. Diversity means different things to different people. Inclusion is something that, you know, we're all kind of, we expect schools to identify what their challenges are and who the underserved populations are that they serve, and work towards improving that. So, you know, here in India, of course, it is, you know, when the pandemic hit, we heard from a lot of the schools that, you know, they realized that actually a lot of their students didn't have access, right? They were in parts of the country, they were, you know, at home, and they didn't have access to the types of delivery. So they had to retrofit their infrastructure to be able to get these students access. And in some cases, schools were bringing, you know, selective students onto campus in a socially distanced manner with special permissions from government and things like that, because that gave them access. So that's just an example of, that's the story that we want our schools to be telling, because they have this opportunity. They recognize and that, you know, that they need to ensure that they recognize that they're underserved populations and ensure that they are doing something about it. You can't stick your head in the sand and just pretend it doesn't exist. We expect that schools are working towards that. But I do think in terms of some of the other things within AACSB with regards to ethical practices, like we're very, as an organization, you know, the way that our accreditation is set up, the process that it's run, it imbibes that ethical decision making, no conflict of interest throughout the entire process. We're very conservative in that regard, and I think that is a way that we are able to access the rest of the world in terms of schools from all parts of the world that are included in AACSB, because we really do consider each and every school with that same idea that everyone has it's an inclusive process as well. So that's where we come to it.
Very, very interesting. Professor Raj, I mean, I was also, trying to understand the fact that relationships are great, and probably now we'll be exposed to a circle or a square during this discussion. So I'm really, hoping that how is the digital, the transformation strategy working at your institution? I mean, especially in the fact or in the terms of the, when corporates want to, work with you. Earlier, probably, it was faculty-led or faculty to a corporate player. But now with technology, with digital transformation, I think you can put probably better yardsticks to measure the output or the impact of what is happening. A greater number of players or faculties being involved on the same project, a greater reflection of what is being done at the institution and the corporate world being captured and brought into the classroom. So any of those things as a digital transformation strategy that happened during the last, 2 years or so?
Thank you, Nishit. I would love to comment on that. So it's been fashionable for the industry to often say that academia moves very slowly. And to some extent, that's true. I'm part of the academia. I just happen to be a dean, but I'm a faculty. But in 10 days, the greatest transmigration in the history of mankind happened really on a digital front when the pandemic hit. We higher education institutions had to learn something that we had told each other we could never do. We are so good looking and so good, we belong in a classroom. You can't see us or hear us and understand us online. And we did that. In 10 days, we were forced to do it. So innovation is happening as we speak. I'll give you 2 examples. Yesterday, we had a meeting in which in every small group of faculty, we had at least one student, at least one alum, and at least one industry leader to discuss a variety of issues. And so different voices are coming together. Pre-COVID, there is no way I could have gotten an industry giant to actually walk in for a 1-hour meeting or a 2-hour meeting. Now it's easy for them to do. So that's one. The second piece is that our students are demanding more. And it's the mode of delivery has become merely a simple issue of how we must innovate to teach and they must innovate to learn, but they're demanding more. I was struck by the comment that Amber made earlier. Talent has choices, and I'm seeing repeatedly in my students the joyless pursuit of money doesn't appeal to this next generation. Now, I'm an immigrant. I came into this country essentially to get out of poverty. And so it's hard for me to understand that. But the talent that Amber is dealing with, that AACSB has created, that Mark is trying to motivate, is motivated by societal good, is motivated by making a difference, is motivated by diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, is motivated by sustainability. These were things that were in the back of our minds and we could never put them together. With the technology, with today's conversation that we are having, we are able to bring all of that together. Having said that, I don't want to get your hopes up. We are learning how to measure this. academic journals, but one nice way to measure research productivity. Mark mentioned business publications that are equally reputable. We have to learn how to use those. And now what about service? When I request my faculty to serve on the board of a company or an organization, how do I reward them for that? How do I measure it? And that's where AACSB is beginning to help us. Nishit, did I respond to your question?
Yeah, very, very interestingly. In fact, I'll try to get some perspective on this from Mark by adding a little dimension. When Raj said that, you're trying to do better, maybe reducing carbon footprint. We talk about sustainability. We talk about, being ethical. So how all of this translates into better engagement with the corporate world? Do they recognize it better? Do they give you additional brownie points because you are not flying as much, or you're not, you're saving the carbon footprint? How does it, or at least how are you communicating it better to the corporate world that we're doing all good, so probably we are a better school to recruit or engage with?
I'm going to link it back to AACSB. Because Standard 1 requires business schools to have a strategic plan, and to have a strategic plan that has been approved or vetted by stakeholders. So business advisory groups as well as alumni. So I like to work with business advisory groups as well as alumni. I keep them as two separate groups because I think they have two separate missions. The business advisory groups keep us focused. And as a dean and a faculty member, I want to make sure that I'm relevant. I think that one of the greatest changes in education, and this goes really with what Amber's saying. I'm looking at your Coursera on your screen. I worry, what keeps me up at night is not COVID-19. Is business education becoming a commodity item? And I worry about the value that we bring to the classroom, because if we're not bringing value, if it's just content per se, then that could be downloaded at Coursera or edX or Udemy for free. And I think the value that we are now bringing to the classroom has changed, so that part of the value proposition now for students to come to a university has got to be more of the ELC opportunities, more of the networking, more of the connections. 20 years ago, when we went to a classroom, we thought that we were the experts. We stood up in front of a room and we professed knowledge. The truth is that there's many sites now at Coursera where the knowledge, just the knowledge per se, can be obtained for a very low cost. The value then is going to have to be on how we make a difference in students' lives. And for those who just believe that we can go back and profess and have very little interaction and almost just become textbooks come alive. I call it academic karaoke, where you just read from a slide. Those days are over. So I do believe that the role of the boards is critical in making sure that we are bringing value. But what is that value? That value may be content, ELC opportunities, almost speed dating with companies. It's not going to be just standing up in front of a room anymore and professing and grading papers. Those days are over.
If I could just say something to that, I think that's a great point, Mark, and thus the importance of constantly taking the pulse of your corporate partners and understanding how can maybe online learning platforms such as Coursera, as an example, complement what you're already offering, content from other top schools. And then you have schools that are looking at the catalog of the more than 8,000 Coursera courses that we're partnering with, and they're actually only offering to their students the content from the top employers. So for their students that want to work in strategic management consulting, they're offering them a learning path from BCG. or a learning path in social media from Facebook or Google, Microsoft, IBM, and there's so many other content providers out there. So it's really about how can you continue with partnering with your corporate partners and complement what's the fantastic offering you have in your academic curriculum and give your talent an edge. So it's about finding that balance. But I great points that you raise.
Very, very interesting. I mean, Professor Raj, I mean, I was intrigued by the fact that, often the business school, one of the important things is a board. And there are two types of boards from what I've looked at. One is the celebrity board, wherein you have illustrious people, big head honch, heavyweight corporate giants out there. We need them. Of course, we are all marketeers. We need to attract better students, faculty, and many others. But at the same time, I mean, how is that? You are engaging with your boards, which are normally a large part of it is corporate driven, and a smaller proportion maybe academic people. I mean, are they coming challenging you on something new, or is it like just reporting and just getting the things vetted?
Thank you, Nishit. I must comment on academic karaoke. That was a beautiful phrase, Mark. I'm going to use that to communicate so much. But you're right, the sage on the stage era is over. We are facilitators of learning. And in that facilitation process, I'm connecting it to Nishit's question, come in practitioners, where they come in and tell us what they need and how we can train the workforce of the future that will work for Amber, which will meet the goals of AACSB and our own institution. The way we have set it up, and it might not be for everyone, we have three different layers of corporate engagement. Monmouth University and the Leon Hess Business School is blessed with a set of alumni. We are equidistant from Philadelphia and New York City, if you look at the map. So we have access to folks that are available to serve on our boards. We have three layers. We have the early emergent board members that are early alums, people that might have graduated from other institutions, illustrious institutions, but they have 3 to 5 years of experience. They come in at that level, and then they contribute to the body of what we are doing and move on to the next level, which is the council level. And then we have a dean's board, which is much more select. That each one of those, that are expectations attached for the board members to put their skin in the game, so to speak. So if they have a certain initiative that they believe firmly in, we request them to give us their expertise, provide us with the other talent in their company that can help us, and provide us with the money to make those initiatives possible. I'll just use one example. Recently, a board member said it's a shame that the new generation doesn't read as much. And so Wall Street Journal, that should be read so that you know what's going on in the business world, and that helps you in the interview process and learning process. Very good. 6,000 approximately people on this campus. When challenged, this donor was able to provide us with 6,000 subscriptions. Now that makes a difference. All of a sudden, they have skin in the game, and every faculty member can now actually in their syllabus insist that that newspaper be a required reading because it's being provided for free. And then the small subtle thing that students bring in, yes, we don't read. We don't read the way you, an old dean, reads, paper and pencil. We read on our phones.
Yeah.
And so we got them digital subscriptions, and we are measuring, watching that. So 3 different layers, 3 levels of contribution is how we have done it, and we find the experience invaluable. Nishi?
Very interesting. And Professor Mark, I mean, out there, do you think that the boards at your school, they look beyond their own organization? Let's say there are people from Microsoft, just to give an example. I mean, would they go outside being industry agnostic and trying to look at, what the school is and how they could probably have your graduates being recruited at Nike for that matter? I mean, even though they come from Microsoft. So, trying to leave behind the fact that they are representing an organization, but trying to bring their experience and using that for the development of the school. I mean, do you see that happening, or do you try to sort of leverage that part?
I see that board members, depending if they're a Fortune 500 or a neighborhood entrepreneur, they're going to come in with different perspectives. But I look at them as partners because they're stakeholders and they want me to succeed. They want the school to succeed, and they also want to succeed. So I urge diversity in the board member composition. It should be small, medium, large, global, because you're going to get different perspectives. And at the end of the day, I truly believe that the future is going to be the small business entrepreneur. That's where the major job opportunities are going to be. And especially when we talk about first generation is opportune for small business development. So not all of our students are going to work at Google or Microsoft. Don't forget about the small organization entrepreneur. So please bring diversity into the boards.
Okay. No, I think that's a very valid point. I mean, diversity has its own value, which is an unsaid truth. This also, I mean, points me to slightly different dimension. Amber, if I could pick your brain on the corporate culture. Now, despite the fact that, I mean, we have all the goods, the technology and the measures and good intentions, how do you, I mean, bring the corporate culture in the mindsets of the new generation who haven't probably been exposed to a real corporate world, the corporate stress, the corporate challenges, and also the corporate opportunity? So is there something that is being done at higher ed to, I mean, train people or the new generation on the corporate culture per se?
So first of all, that's one of the best questions to ask. So for the talent in the audience, to ask in a selection process in your interviews, always ask your interviewers about the corporate culture. It's really insightful into how that organization works. Is it one of empowering its employees? Is it micromanagement? I mean, it really sets the foundation for a meaningful discussion. So what are we doing at Hired? We are organizing a series of digital conferences, in addition to hundreds of company presentations and virtual career events with our employers, where it's a lot of employer branding and talking about their corporate culture. And so actually, when we do these digital conferences, it's not even to talk about a specific graduate program or vacancies, but it's more about their corporate culture. What are they doing in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space? What kind of initiatives, campaigns? And ultimately, it comes down to what are the recruiters looking for, and what we're finding right now, that they're looking for candidates that can dream big, that are visionaries, that have flexibility. And what does flexibility mean? Well, it depends on who you ask. And I'm always asking, because we're always seeing this in different indexes as to what employers are seeking in their future employees in the next 5 years. It's always flexibility. So when you ask an organization what that means to them, for example, one of our employers is the International Organization of Migration, one of the UN agencies. And for them, flexibility could be being open to being assigned to 7 different countries. So it means different things. And so that's the importance of asking these questions. Remember, your interviews are just about just as well for you to understand, is this the right fit for me? Does this organization allow me to grow personally and professionally? We're finding that they're looking for that business acumen. Does the candidate have the skills? Can they do the job? And again, that goes back to bridging that core skill gap of the in-demand skills. And finally, a culture of diverse and inclusive mindset. So this is in terms of corporate culture, and this is what we try to get out and showcase of our employers. And we send a weekly talent newsletter to hundreds of thousands of talent that are subscribed to the Get Hired platform from the EFMD. And we're really showcasing more than anything the company's culture, and we're introducing them in the digital conferences to different people. They're really not even in contact with people from HR or hiring managers. It's all about introducing them to key leaders and stakeholders in the organization across different units, people that are working on the diversity task force, for example. and working on different campaigns in the organization. So that's some of the work that we're doing in addition to the assessments. So we have free assessments available to all of our talent on the Get Hired Global platform, and I'll share it in the chat in just a moment, provided by Aon Assessment Solutions. And our schools are actually, we've had tens of thousands of EFMD talent practice these assessments because assessment centers are such an important part of selection processes. And that really gets you to understand what is the best work environment for you, what are your motivators, what is it that you love doing, what is it that you don't like doing, and that's just as insightful. So starting from that, and so many of our EFMD school career centers, they actually require the students take our online assessment before they even go in to meet with their career advisor. So that's another way that we're talking about corporate culture, and we're getting talent to really be more comfortable in those interviews, asking these questions to really ensure, is this organization the right fit for me? And going beyond just seeing a vacancy, and so many people will, and there's a big difference here in gender, men and women, where women will try to meet all of those prerequisites and requirements in a job description before applying. And that is such a big mistake, because if you can already check all those boxes, it's probably not the right organization for you, because there's very little room for growth for you. So men are quite the opposite, where they might just meet a couple and apply to those opportunities, which I'm actually more in favor of that. We say 80% is a good rule there. But use your interviews, be comfortable asking these questions, and prepare, do your research, prepare in advance. And alumni.
That's brilliant.
Finalize with alumni are such a great ally, reaching out and connecting with the alumni from your alma maters, maybe that are working for that target organization or have worked there in the past, and can really give you some insight into the corporate culture.
That's very insightful, Amber, and I'm sure, having done so much of it, you are truly global and multicultural. So I have to learn this from you for sure. At a separate discussion. But also, for the benefit of the audience, since you ran so many surveys, can you pick or highlight 3 of those top things which are highlighted by the talent, that this is what, as students, not the recruiters, but from the students' perspective, that what is that they're really looking at in the corporate culture when they choose one organization over the other?
So what are they looking for? They're looking for an organization that provides for them. They're fortunately no longer looking, and we do a lot of education here they shouldn't be. There are students that, yes, they're looking for that return on investment, but they should not be taking a role for the title or for the money that quickly gets old. And so they're valuing a workplace that will provide for them, that will allow them to grow. It's about, does this next opportunity, is it a stepping stone that will get you closer to your next career goal? And we no longer even ask the question, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? It's more, I would not even ask, where do you see yourself 2 years from now? But is this bringing them closer to their overall goal? Maybe that career aspiration that they had when they decided to pursue one of our programs. And that's what they're valuing, and to be empowered and to make a difference and to have impact in the organization, and social impact. And so they're looking for opportunities, that they're looking for sustainability. They're looking for those opportunities that are in socially impactful areas. More and more, they're looking for mission-driven organizations, the global nonprofits. That used to be a career path of students studying international relations or governance degrees. Now it's so many MBAs that are looking for that. And actually, I just came back from teaching at one of our schools, in one of our EFMD schools in France, that's in the process of creating a school of ecological and social transition, that all of their students across all programs will actually be taking courses in this school as part of their degree program. So yes, we are seeing more and more, even MBAs and those that would have chosen a more traditionally high income return on investment, they're going a different route now. And we're also in the midst of what you might have heard, the Great Resignation. So as I said before, talent have choices. And I hear from so many CEOs these days that the majority of the people that they are interviewing It's because they have been asked to go back to work physically in the workplace 2 or 3 days a week or more. And so they're looking for that flexibility. They have come to prove themselves that they can get the job done. They can be just as productive. So while, yes, some are looking to return to the workplace, there's so many more people that want to decide when and how and what that hybrid model looks like for them. So that's another big thing. And so many of the global job boards, including us, no longer are you searching there. You can search by location, but almost all the top job boards have added a checkbox that you can search by remote opportunity. So it's that flexibility that takes precedence these days over the cash component of a salary remuneration.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. In fact, Amy, this really puts us as accrediting bodies in a very tight spot, because hearing about ecology, sustainability, new kinds of jobs, roles, hybrid working, different types of boards. What do you think is the future of a new, or the future accreditation would look like? Do you think it would have the same 10 chapters, or where do you think it's leading? What would it really contain, or how would it motivate the schools that we have in our network?
Well, the 2020 standards, though they were written largely before the pandemic, were done with that goal in mind. That goal of the revision of the standards was, what makes a great business school in the future, and how can we ensure this is the long-term sustainability of these standards. And that is why we went out, did a design approach. We asked a lot of schools what they were seeing. And, we had micro-credentials written into the standards before everything accelerated to online. We had the requirement that PhD programs had, teaching effectiveness built into their program, and that schools were supporting faculty. This was already happening, right? All of this was, the standards are already there. The challenge that I see for business schools, which was what Mark was talking about, is, as we unbundle business education in so many different ways, what is the value that business educators, and that's where that, we know faculty can do emergency response teaching. We never thought that could happen, but we know they can. But we also know that risk management around that is important, right? We need to be nimble as business schools. We need to ensure that business schools are thinking about these things and planning for a future they can't see yet. And that's the same for their students, right? You have to, you see in Australia, they have the regulations and the systems in Australia. They've been doing online digital. Many schools went digital before all this happened, and the reason was because they just needed to continuously push the boundaries and serve a different set of students. So that, I think, is we have to keep schools at the cutting edge, and part of that means relooking at what the value is that business educators and educational institutions bring. And that's why it's all about what's important for society. It's not just how many degree programs you have, how many students you get jobs, at what salaries you get them jobs at, how many publications you have. None of that really matters in a holistic review. It's all of it together and the impact that the school is having. So I think the standards are already pretty much there. We hope they'll stand the test of time, and it's through the application that we'll see.
That's interesting that we are all converging in our views, and I think it is being captured in the accreditation bodies like EFMD and AACSB. Glad to hear that. Also, Professor Raj, one of the things that comes back to my mind when we talk with the corporates, and Amber, correct me, or rather add wherever you feel, we feel a lot of students, particularly in the emerging side of the world, are looking to the entrepreneurship world. So the moment we talk about entrepreneurship, everybody wants to have be an entrepreneur and no longer work for an organization. and everybody has at least, if not more, at least more than 3 or 4 ideas which they really want to focus on, and they always at best see organization as a stepping stone for those who are probably not having the right funding to begin with or launch themselves into the market space, and then they really want to go back into the entrepreneurship world. How are we as business schools, because we have an underlying responsibility to service the corporate world, which is a very, very large proportion. So how we are trying to help some of those students to balance and think that it is okay and it is good and it is productive and it is enriching to work with the corporate world and not necessarily be an entrepreneur every time. Anything that is being done in that space, Raj?
Absolutely. I'm happy to respond. But before I do that, I like Amy's point that AACSB standards have always been forward-looking. The reason why AACSB has served as a gold standard in accreditation for close to 100 years is because the standards have kept up with the time, and notice that we are revising them continuously, and thousands of stakeholders have input into that. I also want to go back just for a second to what Amber said earlier about vision and dreaming big and flexibility, and then tie it in with your question, Nishit.
Yeah.
The fallacy exists in the mind of a traditional student, 18 to 23, 23 to 28, that entrepreneurship means setting up a business, an innovative idea, either fill a need or meet a demand or fill a gap, or come up with something completely new to the world. All of those are true. But more and more, and Amber can speak to this as we go, corporations are able to provide my students with opportunities to be entrepreneurial within the structure. What that brings is security of job. What that brings is a regular paycheck till you hit that big idea. And what it brings is a brand name recognition and the support that the entire infrastructure provides. So I'm trying to get the idea across to my students that entrepreneurial, and your word, Nishit, entrepreneurial thinking is not limited by serving in corporate America or corporations. You could easily move outside. There are countless examples of people that have served in big companies, moved out and done something of their own. We could do that. The third point I would like to make, and then I'll stop, is entrepreneurship, the way we are defining it on our campus. We are starting a center for entrepreneurship. We have got donors that are happy to help us with that. And we are going to include students from all schools. So Monmouth University has School of Nursing, School of Social Work, Humanities, Social Sciences. And so there is a connection that we are making with all other schools on campus and drawing them into the conversation so that we have multifaceted, multifunctional teams that work together towards entrepreneurial ideas. And so those are the 3 different ways we are doing it. I hope I responded to your question. There are also some questions online, so just keep an eye on that.
All right. So Raj, that's very good. And I'll probably get Amber's perspective here. Because Amber, I think you would agree. You could be entrepreneurial by being within the organization, like Raj rightfully, beautifully crafted. And how do you see that? Because you interact with the range of corporates across industries and verticals. So what's your perspective in this?
Absolutely. And we fully prepare, and through the years, I've always fully prepared my students for not only that startup career path as entrepreneurs themselves, but entrepreneurial mindset, because it could be developing and doing business development in new territories, opening a new office, and that's the mentality, or going to work for a startup, but someone else's startup. One of the trends that I've recently identified just over the last few months, and I was speaking to a Financial Times journalist about it just a week ago, was the number of students that I'm finding, current students and recent graduates that have their own companies and are simultaneously looking for another opportunity, but plan to maintain their business venture. Every Thursday, we moderate and we organize Get Hired Thursdays on Instagram Live, and I moderate those. And so many of the student ambassadors and representatives that I've been interviewing from our EFMD schools over the last few weeks, it's incredible how such a high percentage of them have their own company and they're looking for opportunities. So this is very positive. And I mean, it used to be something that could be a red flag for employers interviewing you. Oh, you have your own company. Are you going to be able to fully focus and dedicate your time? When you position it right, that entrepreneurial experience is very valuable for so many employers out there. And the fact that you've taken risks, you've made these mistakes, perhaps. And so now on our CVs, you actually highlight that. You might put your most relevant, maybe finance experience, and then you'll have a section which is entrepreneurial experience. So perfectly valid to highlight that. And yeah, I fully support that. And I've always supported and encouraged students that where they're unsure when they start out on a program, if I'm going to start my own company, do a business plan, or go to work for someone else, to simultaneously pursue both paths and see what opportunities they get at the end of that. And so often they're able to conciliate both of those opportunities at the same time.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. I think it would be very beneficial for the students out there to, look at both the things as a hybrid space.
Right.
Before we pick the questions from the audience, which Chahat can help us, I'd like to ask one quick question with Mark, and then we can dive in there. Mark, in your opinion, how do you see the future teacher looking like? Would it be like a robot with a lot of AI and technology inbuilt into with a human chip or a smart chip or semiconductors, let's say? I don't know. What do you think? Would be the skill sets teacher would have in going forward? Because like you already said in your previous comments, we have Coursera, Udemy, and FutureLearn and others
Right.
to give the content. So what would be the role of the teacher in future?
I'm going to answer this question by also answering Jennifer's question. So on the chat, Jennifer asked a question about how can industry contribute to curriculum. I see the faculty of the future understanding the skills that learners will obtain upon completion of the course. So what skills will student obtain? I encourage faculty to bring innovation to the classroom so they are not a textbook come alive or they're just not content. There has to be a technological component. There has to be an ethical citizenship component so that the course teaches learners how to be better citizens and better managers. And I like every syllabus to be approved by a business advisory group member to get the stamp of approval. Now, how I'm looking at professors of the future, they do not have to be the content creators. And I want to emphasize this to faculty all over the world, especially faculty that work with me, is that they can partner with companies like HubSpot, like Wix, like Excelos. Many companies, even Google certificates, many companies are working with universities like SAP to provide content that is updated on a regular basis. 20 years ago, I'm going to age myself. When I entered the classroom in 1999, textbooks were updated every 3 years. For the most part, knowledge was not changing rapidly every few weeks. If I teach a digital commerce class, which I did at South Carolina, I would prep lectures on Sunday. I would get to class on Tuesday, and Wix had changed the format already in just a matter of days. There were several times I would tell students, let's take a quick break so I could figure this out before they came, because the show still has to go on. With many technologies, the content is changing so quickly that faculty that are teaching a 3.3 or even a 4.4, they simply do not have time to be masters of content plus service plus research. Raj, it goes back. Our faculty are dying. They're saying, look, I'm teaching technology. I've got to master the classroom. Now you want me to do service. Oh, now you want how many A-level publications? Oh, and let me do free presentations to the Kiwanis Club. So what I'm trying to tell faculty, don't be the masters of content. Find a partner who will be the master of content. And this is very difficult for faculty to give up the content creation. But there's no way. If in schools that have a 3-3 or 4-4 teaching load, it's going to be impossible for professors of the future to be the masters of content creation, because otherwise we cannot have anything. We cannot have research or service. And this is so different than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So again, I worry about faculty health. You know, what will the faculty of the future be? I need to make sure they don't collapse in the classroom.
Yeah. No, I think a very, very valid observation. Yes, Professor Raj, go ahead. You had
Mark, you make such a valid point. The nature of teaching and learning is changing. The nature of our student body and composition is changing, and our faculty are indeed getting burnt out.
Yes.
They need to keep ahead of their students, and the students, we don't confess it in public, but they are much brighter than we are. And so we have to keep up with them. And, the access to information, they don't need information anymore. It's available more than they need. They need a curator of information who can tell them how to sift through information, and then somebody who will help them apply it. And that's where corporate partners are extremely helpful. And I'll take your word, Mark, in being co-creators of our courses. It ties in with the question Jennifer asked online. How do we get, and Bhuvan asked later, how do we get corporations involved in the get-go in creating the right curriculum? Well, we have to rethink what we do. And people like Mark have to provide the thought leadership in AACSB, and Amy, if she is willing to do that as well, to start redefining expectations from faculty. I think there is a great opportunity there to encourage and engage our communities.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. So Chahat, let's take some questions from the audience, and we have some limited time left, so probably we can answer a few. Yeah.
So Nishit, first of all, just remarkable presentation from each of the panel members, and truly there were a lot of points which we have noted down, all of us in the audience. One question that has come up, speakers, is that how can collaborative learning with partner universities solve the current problems of incorporating values, corporate values? Now, there is, partnership with corporate, houses, which is needed. But we are living in an age of collaborative learning, where universities across the world need to join hands and have to work on specific projects, whether it is for the greater good or it is from the organizational standpoint, whatever that is, where both the entities are equally benefited. So if any of you can take that question.
Go ahead, Raj.
Thank you. I need to leave in about 6 minutes, so I'll make this very quick. And that's a very interesting question. I want to point out the case that you're making right now, Chahat, your Dean Rodriguez, and you and others have made with us. And we at Monmouth are privileged to cooperate with Woxsen in serving their student body in any way that we can. But more importantly, there is a project that students have conceived that relates to a small area in Hyderabad. It's hard to believe that there are slums and villages nearby. This is a booming metropolis. But they've connected to make a difference in the life of those that are impoverished. And the students are doing this, not just by providing funds, but also sharing knowledge. At the high school level, we are talking to students and trying to teach them financial personal finance, and our students learn. Everyone here knows, Mark knows this for sure. Being a great student is possible only if you learn how to teach it. So if you teach it, you're being a very good student. Chahat, thank you for the opportunity. Nishit, thank you as well. But I am here for another 4 minutes.
Sure.
I just want to, if I can just say something, I want to also, because in the context of India, where Woxsen is based, I think one of the great contributions that I think Indian schools can provide to the rest of management education is exactly this idea of you don't have to be the sage on the stage. You can be a facilitator of it. And peer-to-peer learning, engagement, we've always said this from the time we started working with schools in India. I mean, Indian schools excel in engagement. It is something, you have a fantastic, part of it is you have fantastic students. And I don't mean this lightly, you have some of the best in the world. In part because of the competition to just get into school is so high. But just unleashing that creativity and that talent in the time that they're there is something that Indian schools have really focused on. And I think, the partnership, like you were mentioning, Raj, with Woxsen, it's a great opportunity. I think even connecting faculty to the faculty at Indian schools to just realize that, they are connected to their students 6 days a week, and concerned about their mental health and all of these things. I think that are just, it's a different world out there, but I think India's got a leg up on that. So I just wanted to point that out.
Sure. Thanks, Emmy, and thanks, Raj. So I think we've covered pretty much all the questions. Now, I would request each one of you, if you can give us a closing remarks in just one line as a message to the world. And from Woxsen platform in association with EFMD and AACSB, please give your
Go ahead, Raj, since you have to leave, so we start with you.
Thank you. I will steal the thoughts of others here and say I'm leaving with the phrase, dream big. Have a vision. It's valued by those around us, and that makes a difference. Your generation is far smarter than mine. I can tell you that for sure, to my younger folks in this audience. And your pursuit of purpose rather than money is going to take you much farther and take me much farther in life than has ever been imagined. So thank you for that.
Pleasure. Amber?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say, first of all, never decline a speaking engagement. Even those of you that are not necessarily pursuing another opportunity in another organization, but really start building your personal branding, never decline a speaking engagement, and then promote it online. And then my next piece of advice is always ask for advice. If you ask for advice, you'll get a job. If you ask for a job, you'll get advice. And network with compassion, kindness, and grace.
Excellent. Amy?
I would just say, continue to, on the same lines, continue to engage. Think about every new interaction you have with someone else. It leads to something. It leads to better knowledge about who you are. And you know what? We're doing this online. I recognize Web3 is out there. There is many of you in that generation are going to be finding ways to immerse yourself with others in different platforms. It doesn't have to be face-to-face. We recognize that. But just put yourself out there and learn from those around you. And I think that's the best way to continue to learn throughout your life.
Very impressive. Mark?
For all the assistant professors and associate professors listening to this, embrace experiential learning. Leave your comfort zone. My entire career was based on ALC projects, and I couldn't imagine a career without working with local businesses. A good research will be published somewhere. So don't worry about where research will get published. Worry about who are you partnering with and the difference that research is going to make. And I promise you, it will end up someplace.
Impressive. And I would just say that, it's good to sometimes take a break and take time to think and plan. I think planning, if you put a little bit more time, I think you will excel, because I mean, while we're running and we're just chasing things, I think sometimes just breathe, relax, write down things, and it will help you achieve those goals much better. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Amber. And thank you, Woxsen and Chahat, for giving us this opportunity. And
Thank
look
you.
forward to interact with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thanks for having me.
Have a
Bye,
great,
everyone.
I wish you a very happy new year ahead.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Likewise.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.